Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So today I want to have a look at a conversation Sargon had with a young woman in Swindon. In particular, I want to look at her type of argumentation. But before we get to that, we've got a few things to cover. And first of all, I want to say good on her. Good on her and good on Sargon for actually sitting down and having a fairly reasonable conversation. This is something we need more of, okay? We shouldn't be afraid to discuss things with people we disagree with. This is a much healthier option than things like this.
Try it without fucking try it without your bodyguard. Fuck off. Then fuck off. Look, fuck off.
I don't know.
Or things like this.
Things start closing down, tensions rising, all that bullshit stuff happening that way. And then Trump fucking biggest divisive thing ever. How is this over? That's all I'm saying.
And unfortunately today these things are all too common. We see them all the fucking time instead of reasonable conversations and debates.
What you're seeing behind me is quite a bit of commotion. This is an event at Berkeley where Milo Yiannopoulos, who is known as an internet troll, a self-proclaimed internet troll, a very provocative speaker, he was invited here to the campus. And you can see from the reaction, I'm going to step out of the shot here. What is happening here is that these are student protesters, some anarchists, from what I can gather.
So I do have to give credit to people like Sargon and this young woman for sitting down and having a reasonable conversation, even though they greatly disagree with each other. This is the way we should deal with disagreement, not by trying to shut down other people. Now, before I get into that video, I do want to discuss a very important point which I've covered numerous times in the past in this series. So I'm not going to go into it in any great detail, but just briefly go over the series of events, just in case there's new viewers or someone's watching this sometime in the future and they're unaware of the series of events, which are very important for the context of the video. But if you want a more detailed breakdown, I'll link to those videos I've done in the past down below, as always. But of course, I'm talking about the now infamous "I wouldn't even rape you" tweet, which seems to never die. And as this is brought up constantly by the young woman that Sargon is talking to, we really need to discuss the timeline of events so we get the full context of the tweet and why Sargon did it. Now, this is something which is constantly ignored by critics of the tweet, and I'll get to that in a minute. So this all started when politician Philip Davies was in front of a political committee and he was asking for a talk on International Men's Day about male topics. Now, personally, as a men's rights activist, I think this is perfectly reasonable. As Philip Davies brought up, there are many, many issues concerning men that should be talked about, and that's what International Men's Day is for, talking about those issues that affect men. I don't think this is too much to ask for. But Jess Phillips laughed at the very notion that men need an International Men's Day or a discussion about their issues. Apparently this was a joke to her. And her reasoning was that the majority of Parliament is male, and therefore apparently they're only concerned with male issues. Now, this isn't surprising because politicians like Jess Phillips are only concerned with female issues, so she's projecting her own bias onto her male counterparts. Unfortunately, if we look at the political makeup of just about any Western government, you'll find that male politicians usually are more concerned about female issues than they are about male issues. And this is perfectly understandable from a political point of view, because females tend to be more concerned about female issues and men tend to be very protective of women in society and more concerned about female issues. This is why 2/3 of medical spending is on women. This is why Western governments are constantly bringing up the wage gap, even though it's been debunked 100 times.
Equal pay day means that a woman has to work about this far into 2014 to earn what a man earned in 2013. Think about that. A woman's got to work about 3 more months in order to get what a man got because she's paid less. That's not fair. That's like adding an extra 6 miles to a marathon. It's not.
This is why whenever there's a bit of legislation about domestic violence, it's always focused on female victims and male perpetrators. This is why spending on shelters for male victims of domestic abuse is not proportional. This is why there is special services and funding for females who are homeless, even though they're the minority of homeless people.
Some months ago, I did a piece on homelessness, which is overwhelmingly a male problem. A social worker wrote in to say, she emailed me to say that she works that she works with the homeless, and if a homeless woman comes to her on a Friday, she has to give her clothes, money, food, and accommodation. If a man comes in on a Friday, he's sent back out on the street with nothing. I mean, are we really surprised that today, for every woman who commits suicide, 3.5 men will?
This is why there's special government committees trying to bring down the length of female sentences in criminal cases, even though men who commit the exact same crimes as women with same criminal history, etc., same circumstances, will get longer sentencing and are more likely to be found guilty. So despite that female advantage, governments want to give them more. This is a constant thing. There are many, many examples where governments pander to women. But not according to Jess Phillips. According to Jess Phillips, the government is male-centric because most of the government is male. I suspect somehow that even if 100% of the government was female, that still wouldn't be enough. I suspect that she would still say, well, females still aren't equal in society, therefore they still need special services, etc., etc. And it's easy to believe that if you totally ignore male victims and male issues. Then it's easy to only see female victims and female issues.
What makes you angry?
Loads makes me angry. I think, obviously, gender inequality is one of the things that drives me the most. But what drives me more than actually the existence of it is the denial of it. That really, really winds me up. Is that, actually, we're all doing all right. Well, if you'd worked at Women's Aid where I worked, where every single day you saw how women had less power and what that actually meant for their safety, you'd be absolutely banging your fists. And then just it happens to men too, It
happens to men.
Do you want a point? It happens to men as well. Oh, yeah, okay.
So, as you might have guessed, this got Jess Phillips a lot of blowback. And that blowback ranged from fair criticism to angry comments on Twitter.
And then just in the evening, on Thursday evening, somebody emailed me sort of screenshots of people saying really, really awful things about me, that they wanted to rape me, bind and gag me, pour molten metal over me, really awful things.
Now, I'm not supporting any type of threats on Twitter, but let's be realistic here. Whenever a public figure or a politician says something controversial, they will get a range of comments from fair criticism to abuse. And in fact, if we look at statistics, male politicians get more abuse than female politicians. And males online get more abuse than females online, although females do lead in a couple of categories and are more likely to be offended or take it serious than their male counterparts. But Jess Phillips wasn't getting this criticism and abuse because she's female. She was getting it because of statements that she said, because of her actions. This is no different than someone criticising a male politician like Donald Trump, for example. And no, as I've said numerous times in the past, I'm not a Trump supporter, nor a Hillary supporter for the record. I think they were both bad choices. But you can't deny that Donald Trump gets a massive amount of abuse. Now, this isn't because he's male any more than it was because of Jess Phillips being female. It's because they're public figures and they have a lot of people who disagree with them. But Jess, being the politician and also being a feminist, spun this. She turned it into her being the victim. So instead of the conversation being about what she had done, her actions, what she had said, instead it became about her being the victim of abuse online, and that females, because she's only focused on females, being the main victims of abuse online, which statistically is simply not true. She then joined a campaign to censor certain people online.
My name's Jess Phillips and I'm the Member of Parliament for Birmingham Yardley. I'm taking part in Reclaim the Internet because I am sick of young women telling me that they don't want to speak up and give their ideas because they're worried of the backlash that they might get from trolls or bullies. So I think it's time that we did something about it. I myself have had rape threats, have had my children's life threatened, not by anyone who's actually going to do it, but by faceless people on the internet. This is our street now. This is where we are when we're meeting our friends. This is where we do our business online. And we want to make sure that it's as safe for our daughters as it is for our sons, and that we're not missing out on the big ideas of the future because we just don't want to hear women's voices. So that's why I'm taking part, and I look forward to the progress we can make.
Now, the problem with any group being able to censor any other group online is it's always going to be unfair. If you give power to one particular ideology, they will target their rival ideologies and their critics in a different way than they will target people who agree with them. And Jess Phillips herself is the perfect example of this. In fact, she threatened to stab a member of parliament. Now, I know this was a joke. It was hyperbole. She wasn't actually planning on stabbing anyone. But if we were to apply the same standards to Jess Phillips as she applied to her critics, then she should be banned from social media. Full stop. End of story. So when she joined this campaign to censor the internet or silence her critics, one thing she brought up was the number of rape threats that she has received. Now, this is extremely important. This is probably the most important point being made in this entire video.
I myself have had rape threats, I myself have had rape threats,
She brought up the topic of rape, not Sargon. And she was using the notion that she was getting all these rape threats as a means of silencing people like Sargon. And Sargon's tweet was a response to that. He purposely sent her a non-threat, knowing that she would then turn around and use it as a threat and prove his point. That it's not about being threatened, it's about using those threats as an excuse to silence opposition. Now, this would be no different than if Trump decided to silence people from the far left because he received some nasty comments. Now, obviously, I don't agree with that any more than I agree with Jess Phillips silencing her critics. And for the record, I don't support people making abusive or threatening tweets. I don't think it's productive, but at the same time, those should not be used as an excuse to silence everyone else or as a distraction. And we saw this after the Peterson-Newman discussion on TV.
The Channel 4 people claim that Kathy has been targeted with threats, a torrent of online abuse by internet trolls. Yeah. It's like 50,000 trolls. That's a lot of trolls. You might start thinking maybe they're not all trolls, but in any case, overwhelmed by misogynistic abuse and threats, and that they had called in a security specialist to assess the level of threat. And so it was the beginning of the attempt to twist the story around so that the story became Cathy Newman, poor, embattled Channel 4 newscaster, was merely trying to do her job, even though she might have been a bit provocative, interviewed alt-right hero Dr. Jordan Peterson in an honest manner to expose his agenda, posted the results to YouTube, and was immediately mobbed by his army of internet trolls, right? So she went from, so my sense is she went from journalist playing a variety of complicated games to target of criticism online, to heroine, embattled heroine in the panoply of martyrs to whom similar things have happened in the past. And
once Cathy Newman started to get blowback and criticism because Jordan Peterson absolutely thrashed her, it suddenly became about all the abuse she was receiving. Unfortunately for her, though, the majority of that abuse was actually by her fans towards Jordan Peterson. But, you know, ignore that. That's not the important thing, right? Because it's all about the spin. It's all about creating a threat narrative and then using that threat narrative as a distraction and as an excuse to silence your opposition. So this is what Sargon was replying to. Jess Phillips brought up rape threats, and Sargon purposely responded by sending her a non-rape threat, knowing it would be reinterpreted through the feminist lens into a rape threat, which is exactly what happened, thus proving Sargon correct. But this is not the way it's been framed by numerous people who insist that it was Sargon who brought up rape. And they ask the question, why did you bring up rape? Why rape? It must be to silence this poor woman who is a victim of rape, as Thomas Smith said live on stage.
That is an unacceptable thing to say to somebody. To tell a rape victim, a sexual assault victim, I wouldn't even rape you, is disgusting.
Why?
Jess Phillips is not the victim of rape. She was groped in a pub when she was 20. Now, that's wrong, and it is sexual assault, but it's not rape. She's not a rape victim who cowers at the mere mention of the term rape.
I think so, and what I really worry about this whole episode is that I'm being painted as some sort of a victim. Well, actually, I'd much rather be painted as somebody who stood up to it, as a warrior against it.
That goes against the narrative that she's a helpless rape victim, which is being thrust on her by people like Thomas Smith, Go Fem Yourself, Kevin Logan, and, surprisingly, Devon Tracy.
Now, Carl brought up rape. It wasn't like rape was on the table. He just brought that up.
Hold on. Sorry, I have to stop that clip for a second. There's a slight mistake there. Just let me fix it, and then I'll play you the full clip. Hold on. Here we go.
Now, Carl brought up rape. It wasn't like rape was on the table. He just brought that up to intimidate, to fuck with, to scare, and to bully this woman. And, of course, because Sargon's popular, he brings with him 1,000 other fuck-ups, who then mirror and copy and send their hateful bullshit at the same target.
Now, see, that's much better. That's much better because it seems that Devon Tracy is now Kevin Logan 2.0. How the mighty have fallen. See, I didn't know Devon Tracy was drinking the poison Kool-Aid, but apparently he's been drinking quite a lot lately because he's been using the exact same arguments as Kevin Logan. That's rather unfortunate. Now, he did make another argument earlier in that same video, and I do want to look at that clip as well.
Does anybody think it would be cool or no big deal to say to a black person like Obama, or who's a black leader, Cory Booker, I wouldn't even lynch you? Hey, Cory Booker, I don't like what you're saying about reparations. Here's a tweet. I wouldn't even lynch you. What if I had said that to him? I'm against his view on reparations. Who the fuck would defend that? Oh, I didn't say I'd lynch him. In fact, I said I wouldn't lynch him. You brought up lynching to a black man in public, and you're now going to pretend that nobody knows the reference? Nobody knows what you're trying to do? It's just demented.
Now, I would agree with Devon here if this particular person received a comment saying, I wouldn't even lynch you, out of the blue, then yeah, that would seem fairly threatening. However, if the particular person in question had been claiming to have received thousands of lynching threats on Twitter and was unable to produce any of them, and was using these mysteriously vanished lynching threats as a means of silencing their opposition, then someone saying to him, I wouldn't even lynch you, would be perfectly reasonable, because they would be responding to the claims that this person has made. In fact, I made a similar point in an earlier video in this series. I think it went something along the lines of, if a white supremacist was claiming that black people are more likely to rob you, or are the only ones who are likely to rob you, and a black activist came out and tweeted at that person saying, don't worry, I wouldn't even rob you, that would be perfectly reasonable, because they're responding to the claim made by that person. There is a point to it. So, no, Sargon did not bring up rape. He did not bring it up to silence a helpless rape victim.
Obviously, this is a threat. Obviously, he's bringing up rape to a woman in public life, in public. This is not acceptable on any level. And that's why he did it, because he's a fucking baby, a crybaby.
He did not bring it up as a means of intimidation, and anyone who says that is either completely ignorant of the series of events, or alternatively, they're purposely lying to you. It's that simple. What Sargon did is he responded to a claim made by Jess Phillips. She is the one that brought up rape. Let me stress that once again, because it is extremely important. Okay, now, having said that, let's go have a look at the discussion Sargon had with this young woman in Swindon.
Right, hi Claire, my name's Carl. It's lovely to meet you. I see that you've come out with anti-racist and anti-fascist protesters.
Yeah.
I assume you would call yourself an anti-racist and anti-fascist?
Yes.
Could you tell me what you positively believe? Like, instead of saying, I'm anti-this, what are you for?
I'm for people to be able to believe what they want to believe, but to sort of do so without having kind of veiled, or what could be perceived as veiled threats sort of said to them.
Sorry, gents, we're trying to interview here, sorry.
Okay, cool.
Just respect for the lady, if that's okay. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, Karen.
Yeah, so I think that there's a way of kind of phrasing things that it can be made to look as if it's innocent, but it's actually not. And I think that, the reason I've come here today is to ask you about the content of your tweet to Jess Phillips.
Yes.
I understand you wanted to make a point about freedom of speech. Yes. I understand she did something that you perceive to be objectionable. I don't quite know why you wouldn't apply the same grace to her as you do to yourself, but...
Okay, so clearly she doesn't understand the concept of free speech, because at no point was Sargon suggesting that Jess Phillips shouldn't be able to say offensive things. In fact, I'm pretty sure Sargon would support her right to say offensive things. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that Sargon doesn't have the right of reply, or anyone else, for that matter, doesn't have the right of reply. The right of reply is not silencing someone, is not taking away their right to say something. In fact, this young woman is using her right of reply right now to reply to Sargon's tweet. Now, she wouldn't see that as censorship or trying to silence Sargon or trying to take away his right of free speech. Yet somehow she sees what Sargon did with his tweet as trying to take away Jess Phillips' right to free speech. And the ironic thing is, it's Jess Phillips who was trying to take away people's right to free speech, not Sargon. But of course she doesn't know this because she's only read one-sided biased accounts of this.
Nevertheless, I would like to understand why that particular comment.
Because I knew they wouldn't be able to resist it.
What did they being?
Jess Phillips, the media, the Westminster establishment.
But surely there's lots of things they wouldn't be able to resist. You could have said anything that, inflammatory, but you chose that particular thing.
I'm afraid.
Incorrect. Sargon did not choose that particular thing. Jess Phillips chose that particular thing. If you look at the timestamp of when she uploaded her video and when Sargon replied, you see that Jess Phillips brought up the topic of rape and Sargon was replying to her. But the narrative she will soon spin is that Sargon brought up the topic of rape to silence poor helpless Jess Phillips because the mere mention of the word rape takes away all her autonomy and reduces her to a helpless victim, and this is an evil, evil man using the patriarchy to oppress women, or something along those lines.
I want to understand why.
I've just said. I honestly thought, and I believe, and I was correct in this, that they wouldn't be able to ignore it. Because I've tried to engage with all of these people. For example, Jess Phillips, she's got a long history of being...
How have you tried to engage with them?
I'm about to tell you. Jess Phillips has a long history of, frankly, in my opinion, being a bigot. I'm concerned about this kind of...
But why isn't she allowed to be, if you believe in freedom of speech?
Hang on, let me explain myself.
Okay, once again, she demonstrates that she doesn't understand the concept of freedom of speech. Yes, Jess Phillips does have the right of freedom of speech. Yes, that includes saying things that some people find offensive. But it also includes people's right to reply and say, you know what, I think I find that fucking offensive. And replying to someone who has said something offensive is not taking away their right to free speech. At no point has Sargon said that Jess Phillips should be silenced. So why does she see this as Sargon trying to silence Jess Phillips or take away Jess Phillips' right to free speech? Well, it's because he's replying to a woman, isn't it? If there was a male politician that said something racist and a group of people criticised him publicly, it would be pretty simple and straightforward for her, right? It would be people responding to something which is offensive. And in her mind, those people would be justified in doing that. But she doesn't see Sargon's interaction with Jess Phillips that way. She sees it as male versus female, as we will see as this talk goes on. And she excludes the things that Jess Phillips says. And she excludes the fact that Sargon is replying to those offensive things, and she just reduces it down to evil man trying to silence helpless woman.
So I find it deeply concerning that we have politicians like that in the Parliament. I've tried to engage with them, I've emailed them, I've tweeted them, I've tried to just speak to them as normal people, and I've been blocked at every turn. I've been ignored because I have no particular means of compelling them to listen. There's no reason they have to. I'm just a guy on the internet. I have nothing over them. And so I thought, right, okay, well, if I have to become a free speech extremist, I will take this extreme position and I will say something that I know they can't resist. And lo and behold, here we are.
But why that particular thing?
Because they couldn't resist it.
Once again, she brings up why that particular thing. And once again, she believes that Sargon is the one that started the conversation about rape and not Jess Phillips. Now, to be fair, Sargon really doesn't do a good job of explaining this to her. It would have been very simple for Sargon to say, Jess Phillips brought up rape threats and I was responding to her. And I've seen Sargon do this in the past. Now, I don't know why he didn't do that at this point. It probably would have saved a lot of time and a lot of hassle, although somehow I doubt she would have really accepted it. But he should have at least tried. So there's a bit of a criticism for Sargon.
It purely as
there's
a
lots of things they wouldn't have been
calculation.
able to resist.
Well,
Why
maybe.
that particular one?
Because I knew that would work.
And what also does hashtag anti-feminism mean?
Oh, I think feminism's terrible. I think that it defines women as victims, and I don't believe women are victims.
It doesn't define
Of course
them.
it
In what ways does it define them as victims?
Well,
now this is astounding. Her whole argument is that Sargon is oppressing Jess Phillips with a tweet, yet she doesn't think that feminism turns women into victims. And yes, she is about to go on and explain how women are oppressed.
In what way does feminism have any legitimacy if women are not being oppressed by men?
What do you mean?
Well, how is feminism legitimate if women are not being oppressed by men?
Women are oppressed by men.
I don't agree.
Okay, so just so we're clear in her position, she doesn't think that feminism sees women as victims or turns women into victims, but at the same time she thinks that all women are oppressed by all men. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's consistent, isn't it?
Well,
So
then...
you've got a lady here who disagrees. Why do you feel that way?
Because they are. Over the world, they're oppressed by men.
Well, yeah, but
your
okay,
comment
let's
to
not
Jess
expand
Phillips.
this.
I know you're trying to send it off as being, just to create controversy, but I think that was a particular choice of phrase.
It was, yeah.
As an oppressive phrase. It wasn't just about controversy. It was also an oppressive thing.
So
Now, once again, she doesn't know the context of Sargon's tweet, and she is assuming that Sargon was threatening Jess Phillips, trying to silence Jess Phillips by using a veiled rape threat, as opposed to responding to something that Jess Phillips actually said. Context really does matter, folks. I can't stress that enough.
I, as an individual who has no power, is oppressing an elected MP.
Of course, yeah, if you use that kind of terminology.
I don't
Why
agree.
that? Well, then you don't agree. I think so. I think to myself, why would you choose, of all the controversial things you could say, why that?
Because...
Yes, you heard it here first, folks. Sargon, the evil patriarch that he is oppressing poor Jess Phillips by sending her a single tweet. Who knew it was so easy to take down a member of parliament? I guess Donald Trump is one of the most oppressed politicians in the world. I guess one of the most oppressed people in the world, with the amount of hate he receives every single day. And once again, not a Trump supporter. I'm just pointing out the facts. Oh, but I guess it doesn't count in his case because he's got a penis, right? So I guess different circumstances. Oh, and by the way, remember, feminism doesn't see women as victims. Okay? Just remember that. It's an important fact. We can't forget that feminism doesn't see women as victims.
And also, I saw your response to the journalist as well that asked you a question. And you said something about, well, you know what, I think if a woman's being a massive bitch, then I can be a complete dick. Yes. So what I'd also like to know is, for all the people that maybe have been complete dicks to you on the internet or anywhere else, male, how many of them have you said that to?
So, once again, because she doesn't know the proper context, she is assuming it is a threat which is targeted at a poor defenseless woman in an attempt to silence her voice, take away her right to free speech and oppress her, as opposed to Sargon pointing out that a dishonest politician is going to misquote and misuse things in an attempt to try to silence her opposition. And I guarantee you, if a male politician had been claiming to have got hundreds of rape threats and was going to use them to try to silence his opposition, then yes, Sargon would have sent the same tweet. Because he would have been making the same fucking point. Once again, context is important.
Well, it'd have no effect saying that to them. I'd say something like they can't get it up, wouldn't I?
I don't know, because I don't think in your way of thinking, so I don't know what you might say. So to me, that says there was a particular reason why you chose that particular insult to Jess Phillips.
Yeah,
firstly, it's not an insult. Secondly, it was in reply to what Jess Phillips said. Once again, context.
And I think it was to be oppressive. It was a comment around sexual violence.
Right,
which is, by its very definition, is oppressive. Are you saying that rape isn't oppressive?
Can I
women?
talk? Can I speak now?
Yeah.
Can I speak uninterrupted? Can I speak uninterrupted?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Right. Like I said, I knew they wouldn't be able to resist that. I knew I would be able to force them to acknowledge that there was principled opposition to the things that they are doing. I do not, in principle, agree that men are oppressing women.
Do you agree that rape is oppressive?
Hang on. You said I could speak. Right. Now, Jess Phillips was, at the time, taking part in something called Reclaim the Internet. Now, this was described by Spikes Ella Whelan as an insidious form of Orwellian control over the Internet to somehow expand free speech by restricting what can be said. And I was making the point, and again, this is a principal point, that you cannot really trust anyone to be a censor. I mean, who would you pick to censor what you have to say on the Internet?
Do you mean, do I name them?
Yeah.
Finally, Sargon gets to the point and tries to explain to her that it was in response to Jess Phillips wanting to censor certain people on the internet. Although, once again, a criticism for Sargon, he doesn't explain to her that Jess Phillips was the one that brought up the topic of rape threats. and he was responding specifically to that. That is a key point. Sargon has brought it up before. I don't know why he didn't bring it up this time. Maybe because it's live. I'm guessing he had a long day. I don't know. But it definitely would have put things in proper context for her, although I don't know if she would have accepted it. I think she's pretty much made up her mind, and that's pretty much based on her ideology, and I think it would be pretty hard to shift that. Now, I started this video a couple of weeks ago. I haven't had a chance to finish it. I've also been working on some other videos, some of which I've already published in that time. But since I started this video, there's been a couple of updates. Sargon published a video of himself joking about the whole media circus, and that video has since been taken down, and it's now being deemed as a rape threat. Now, I'll read to you what he actually said, and I'll let you make up your own minds whether it is an actual threat or a joke. I won't actually play the video because it's likely to get this video taken down, but I'm sure you can find a copy of it somewhere online. Anyway, Sargon said, "There's been an awful lot of talk about whether I would or wouldn't rape Jess Phillips. I suppose with enough pressure I might cave, but let's be honest, nobody's got that much beer." Now, this is clearly a joke, and he's not actually saying he's going to rape Jess Phillips. What he's saying is that the media won't let it die. They've been bringing this up for years and years now, and they'll keep talking about it, and they won't let it die. And even Jess Phillips has said numerous times that she wishes it would go away. Mind you, she tends to blame Sargon for that, which is strange because he's not the one bringing it up. It's her supporters in the media which are doing it. But clearly, this is sarcasm. This is Sargon taking a shot at the media. But it hasn't been reported that way. It's been reported as man who said he wouldn't rape a woman now says he would rape a woman. And apparently those two things are equal, by the way. Apparently a non-rape threat and a rape threat are exactly the same, even though this is clearly sarcasm and not a rape threat. So we then get an article from the Fawcett Society, which is connected to Jess Phillips and Reclaim the Internet. And the article's called "Let's Stop Tolerating the Intolerable and Bar Men Who Threaten Women from Election." Yeah, it's men threatening women. Not people threatening people, but specifically men threatening women. I guess Jess Phillips sarcastically saying she's going to knife a male politician in the front. That's perfectly acceptable because that's a woman saying it to a man. And clearly it's sarcasm, right? In that case, it's sarcasm, so that's okay. But clearly when Sargon uses sarcasm, that's a different story. We have to take that serious because it's a man and he's saying it to a woman. And therefore, you know, obviously the default setting is it's always sexism and it's always serious. So let me quickly read you certain segments from this article. I'll link below if you want to read the whole thing. But it says that those seeking elected office should not, for example, just plucking something out of the air now, promoting, threatening or joking about rape. Okay, what about promoting, threatening or joking about murder? About stabbing someone, for example. Is that okay? Because if it's not, then bye-bye, Jess. You should be gone. You should resign, right? If we're playing by the fair standards. But obviously we're not. And that's the whole point here. Like I said earlier in this video, if you give the right to censor people over to an ideology, they will ignore people on their own side and only target those people they disagree with or rival ideologies or critics. It goes on to say, at this point, we could focus on how we got here, the mainstreaming of extreme views and the politics of hate, the lies and deceit, the shouting down, the Twitter pylons, the hostile environment, the rage against others, women, migrants, black people, Muslims, Jews, LGBT people, or indeed any combination of the above, the misogyny, the objectification, the silencing, the backlash, all manipulated and spread by social media like an unchecked measles virus. Yeah, but the literally thousands of threats of violence that Donald Trump gets every single day, that's perfectly fine, right? Threats to kill him or murder him, that's okay. That's perfectly fine, because that's just criticism, right? And after all, he's male. He doesn't fall into one of the protected categories. So you can say or do whatever the fuck you want. But you dare not make a joke about a woman, because that's an entirely different thing. The rules of the game were designed for a different era, when this behaviour simply wasn't thought possible. But we have descended through too many tiers of Dante's Inferno now. Yeah, okay, it's maybe a little bit over the top. We have seen an MP murdered. Dare I say, the original tweet made by Sargon, nor his recent joke compare to someone being murdered. They are not on the same scale, okay? It continues. We are seeing others receiving multiple death and rape threats. Yeah, some made by Jess Phillips, apparently. And many of which are against Donald Trump. But those are okay. It's just the women we need to protect. Many have additional security in place. Some of our local councillors live in fear of being targeted because their constituents know their address.
I myself have had rape threats, have had my children's life threatened, not by anyone who's actually going to do it, but by faceless people on the internet.
Our politics have changed, so too must our response. We must be clear-sighted and thus not be naive. The abusers have been playing us. Yeah, but this isn't a level playing field, is it? You're only advocating this type of thing towards some people. These things apparently are bad when they're done towards some people, but perfectly okay when they're done towards others. It really depends on someone's race or gender or political view. They're not advocating for an even playing field. Free speech is not an unqualified right. If my free speech intimidates, threatens or silences others, then my right may have been exercised, but their rights are constrained or denied altogether. If his free speech includes talking about committing an act of rape, treating it as a joke, surely we should not be seeing his name on a ballot paper in an election, inviting the electorate to vote for him, endorsing his conduct. Okay, a couple of points here. First of all, he was not talking about raping someone, okay? He was not, I should say, he wasn't seriously talking about raping someone. It was clearly a joke, and the joke was about the media not letting it drop, about constantly bringing it up, about constantly talking about it. And he wasn't treating it as a joke. It was a joke. And there is a difference between those two things. There's a difference between making a serious threat and then treating it as a joke, as if it's not serious, as opposed to saying something sarcastically, which was not intended to be taken serious. And I don't know how anyone could take the recent comment by Sargon seriously. You would either have to be a complete fucking moron, or alternatively, you're trying to use it to get political mileage. Either one really isn't a good option. But this last point is an important one, that we should exclude people from the ballot simply because they're deemed to have said some nasty things. Well, nasty things to women. Saying nasty things to men is perfectly acceptable, apparently. This is bullshit. Surely it should be up to the people to decide if what Sargon has said is so tremendously bad, so offensive, so incredibly wrong, then surely it should be up to the people to not vote for him. Surely it should be their choice. When we have politicians deciding who can stand for election and who can't, based on their opinions, that's an extremely dangerous slippery slope. Could you imagine if a government was filled with, say, right-wing fundamentalist Christians who deemed that anyone who wasn't a believer in God, in their particular form of Christianity and their particular image of God, should not be able to stand for election because, we can't have the ungodly standing for election, can we? What do you think would happen? You would continue to have a government filled with fundamentalist Christians who all believe the exact same thing. This is really no different, and it's just as dangerous. And we can see how ideologically driven these people are, because Once again, what Sargon said was clearly a joke, and it was clearly about the media, not about Jess Phillips. Now, as I've said repeatedly, the Fawcett Society is applying these standards unevenly. They're only applying them to their political opponents. But what they don't realise is that once this standard is in, it can also be applied to people like themselves. I have to wonder how many people on their side of politics have made jokes about dropping the soap in prison. Now that would be a rape joke, wouldn't it? One which is fairly common and seems to be fairly acceptable by most of society because, you know, the intended target is a male, so I guess that's okay. And what about all the young females who have participated in the hashtag #KillAllMen? Should they be excluded from any political career in the future? After all, they're promoting violence and murder, right? Surely that's not acceptable. If we're not allowed to joke about rape, then surely we shouldn't be allowed to joke about murder either, right? Or is murder okay? Is the Fawcett Society saying murder's perfectly acceptable? Now, once again, let me point out before someone quote mines me, obviously I don't think those taking part in #KillAllMen actually intend to kill any men, let alone all men. But my point is, if you start taking things which are clearly jokes or not meant to be taken seriously as serious threats, it is a very, very slippery slope for everyone. And I think you would find that there'd be very, very few people left in politics. Which, considering the present standard we have, it might not be a bad thing. Anyway, I think I'll finish the video here because I think I started it over 3 weeks ago. It's one of those videos that just never seems to be done, and I'm determined to get it finished now and get it up. So I can move on to the next project. I have had numerous interruptions throughout making this video, and I've stopped and started numerous times, so I'm just going to finish it here. I did want to look at some more comments by the young woman that Sargon's talking about, but this video's already run long enough. Maybe I'll put 1 or 2 more after my end credits. But since I started this video, there has been some more controversy regarding the "I wouldn't even rape you" tweet, so I think I'll do a part 2 in which I want to look at an interview that Sargon did with the mainstream media. And that's going to be a very, very interesting video. I'll try to have it done in less than 3 weeks though.
Of all of the other controversial things, you could have said, why that?
Because I knew it would work.
Because you knew that it was particularly sensitive.
Yes.
Particularly emotive.
Yes.
Particularly oppressive.
I don't agree that that is a form of oppression.
Of course it's a form of oppression.
Well, how do you define...
I find it very amusing that she claims that Sargon is oppressing poor Jess Phillips with a single tweet. Yet it's Jess Phillips who is trying to prevent Sargon and others like him for running for political office. That sounds much more like oppression to me than sending someone an offensive tweet.
The law sees it. Well, oppression is when you kind of limit somebody's free will.
Well, it's cruel.
And sort of hold them down.
You mean like trying to prevent someone from running for political office? Is that the type of thing you would consider oppression? I'm just curious.
No,
which by its very definition,
a tweet is not holding anyone down.
Rape is.
So we now go from a tweet saying that I wouldn't rape you to the actual act of rape, right? She's now made that leap, and apparently they're on the same level. It's the same thing, basically the same thing.
How would you define it?
Well, the dictionary defines it as cruel or unjust treatment over a prolonged period of time.
How would you define rape?
Well, forcible sexual contact.
And what does that involve when it's forcible?
Well, what do you mean?
Well, it's oppressive, isn't it? It might not be
oppressive.
But
I haven't raped anyone.
No, I know you haven't. But it's that particular.
So why are you asking me about rape?
Because you're the one that chose that particular Of all the controversial things you could have said, that particular thing.
No, actually, Jess Phillips chose that particular thing. As I've pointed out 100 times in this video, I know you're sick of it, but there is another interesting point here. And that is, if we actually live in a rape culture, you know, a culture that condones and endorses rape and doesn't really care about female victims, then why did Jess Phillips choose to talk about that particular thing, those particular threats? It's almost like she knew that it would have an impact on society, right? That people would get pissed off at that and maybe they would be easier to manipulate. I suspect she chose those particular tweets for that reason.
And I think it was because you knew it was, yes, controversial, but it was controversial for that very reason. Because it's about forcible sexual assault. It's not a joking matter.
Actually, it's kind of the opposite.
It does oppress people. In fact, it's well documented that it's used as a form of oppression.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about rape.
You're talking about oppression.
Yeah, but I'm talking about wouldn't even rape.
But you still use it.
Yeah, but
you could have said anything. I wouldn't go on a date with you. I wouldn't even speak to you.
They wouldn't have responded to that.
They might have done.
They absolutely
I wouldn't even vote for you.
They wouldn't respond to any of that.
That.
They wouldn't respond to any of that.
I don't accept your explanation.
Well, you don't have to accept it.
I agree you knew what it was about. And I think that was the very basis of why you said it.
Yes,
and what I'd like to know is whether you would say it to a man or anybody else.
Yes,
Okay, imagine a male politician came out and said he's been getting rape threats on Twitter and he wants to use this as a means of silencing and censoring certain people he disagrees with. What do you think the reaction would be? Do you think anyone would take him seriously? Do you think Jess Phillips would take him seriously?
It happens to men too, you know.
It happens to men.
Do you want to point? It happens to men as well. Oh, yeah, okay.
And need I point out that in the UK, male victims of rape are not classed as victims of rape under the law. They do not fall under the legal definition. Wouldn't it be nice if we spent a bit of time talking about that instead of, you know, nasty messages on Twitter? You know, maybe we could spend a bit of time caring about the actual rape victims which are being ignored.